Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Narayanam Namaskritya Naram Chaiva Narottamam Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tado Jayam Mudirayet Nashtabrayeshu Avadreshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavati Uttamasloki Bhakti Bhavati Naistiki. Today we are reading Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 5, Chapter 19, a description of the island of Jambudvipa. Text 11. Text 11. Let me offer my respectful obeisance unto Naranarayana, the best of all saintly persons, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. He is the most self controlled and self realized. He is free from false prestige, and he is the asset of persons who have no material possessions. He is the spiritual master of all Paramahamsas, who are the most exalted human beings, and he is the master of the self-realized. Let me offer my repeated obeisance to at his lotus feet. Text 12. Narada, the most powerful saintly sage, also worships Naranarayana by chanting the following mantra. The Supreme Personality of Godhead is the master of the creation, maintains and annihilation of his visible cosmic manifestation. Yet he is completely free from false prestige. Although to the foolish he appears to have accepted a material body like us, he is unaffected by bodily tribulations like hunger, thirst, and fatigue. Although he is the witness who sees everything, his senses are unpolluted by the object he sees. Let me offer my respectful obeisance unto that unattached, pure witness of the world, the Supreme Soul, the personality of Godhead. Text 13. O my Lord, Master of all mystic yoga, this is the explanation of the yogic process spoken by the Lord Brahma, Hiranyagarbha, who is the self-realized. At the time of death, all yogis give up the material body with full detachment simply by placing their minds at your lotus feet. That is the perfection of yoga. Text 14. Materialists are generally very attached to their present bodily comfort and to the bodily comforts they expect in the future. Therefore, they are always absorbed in the thoughts of their wives, children, and wealth, and are afraid of giving up their bodies, which are full of stool and urine. If a person engaged in Krishna conscious, however, he is also afraid of giving up his body. What is the use of his having labored to study the Shastra? It was simply a waste of time. Text 15. Therefore, O Lord, O Transcendence, kindly help us by giving us the power to execute Bhakti Yoga so that we can control our restless minds and fix them upon you. We are all infected by your illusionary energy. Therefore, we are very attached to the body, which is full of stool and urine, and to anything related with the body except for devotional service. There is no way to give up this attachment. Therefore, kindly bestow upon us this benediction. Text 16. In the tract of land known as Bhartavarsha, as in Ilavarsha, there are many mountains and rivers. Some of the mountains are known as Malaya, Mangala Prastha, Mainaka, Trikuta, Rashabha, Kutka, Kaulaka, Sahaya, Devagiri, Rashyamukha, Srishaila, Venkata, Mahindra, Varidhara, Vindhya, Suktiman, Rakshagiri, Pariyatra, Drona, Chitrakuta, Govardhana, Rivataka, Kakubaha, Neela, Gokamukha, Indrakala, and Kamagiri, Besides these, there are many other hills with many large and small rivers flowing from their slopes. Text 17 and 19. Two of rivers, the Brahmaputra and the Sona, are called Nadas, or main rivers. There are other great rivers that are very prominent: Chandravasa, Tamaraparani, Avathoda, Kartamala, Vahyasi, Kaveri, Veni, Pavaswani, Sarakaravarta, Tungabhadra, Krishnavenya, Bamarati, Godari, Nirvindya, Payosni, Tapi, Reva, Surasa, Narmada, Charam Manvati, Mahanadi, Vedasriti, Rishikulya, Trishma, Kaushiki, Mandakini, Yamuna, Saraswati, Drashavati, Gomati, Sarayu, Rodashviti, Saptavati, Shushoma, Satadru, Chandragarbha, Maruvardha, Vitastha, Askini, and Vishwa. The inhabitants of Bharatavarsha are purified because they always remember these rivers. Sometimes they chant the names of these rivers and as mantras. And sometimes they go directly to the rivers to touch them and bathe in them. Thus, the inhabitants of Bharatavarsha become purified. Text 19. The people who take birth in this tract of land are divided according to the qualities of material nature. The modes of goodness, sattva guna, passion, rajoguna, and ignorance, tamoguna. Some of them are born as exalted personality. Some are ordinary human beings and some are extremely abominable for in Bharatavarsha. One take birth exalted according to one's past karma. If one's position is ascertained by a bona fide spiritual master and one is properly trained to engage in the service of Lord Vishnu according to the four social divisions: Brahmana, Kshatriya, Vaishya, and Sudra, and the four spiritual divisions: Brahmachari, Grihastha, Vanaprastha, and Sannyasa. One's life becomes perfect. Text 20. After many births, when the results of one's pious activity mature, one gets an opportunity to associate with a pure devotee, then one is able to cut the knot of bondage to ignorance, which bound him because of varied fruitive activities. As a result of associating with the devotees, one gradually renders service to Lord Vasudeva, who is transcendental, free from attached to the material world, beyond the mind and words, and independent of everything else. That Bhakti Yoga, devotional service to Lord Vasudeva, is the real path of liberation. Thank you so much, devotees. Hare Krishna. I can stop here, Prabhuji.
Yeah, sure. Thank you so much, Madai. Hare Krishna. Yeah, Chaitanya Chandraprabhu, when you're ready, you can start, Prabhuji.
Thank you. Thank you, Radhapani Mataji, for reading the translations today. Thank you, dear devotees, for your association. For the pleasure of all assembled Vaishnavas and for my own purification, we'll be reading, discussing something from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 5, Chapter 19, titled The Island of Jambudvipa, from text 11 to 20. I'll start by offering my prayers. Om Agyantimirandasya Jnananjanashakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prishtaya Bhutale Shrimate Bhakti Vedanta Swami Iti Namine Namaste Saraswate Deve Gauravani Pracharane Nirvishesh Shunyavadi Paschat Desha Tarane जय श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर श्रीवासादि गौर भक्त वृंद हरे कृष्णा कृष्ण कृष्ण हरे 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 राम 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 हरे हरे Mukham karoti vachalam panghum langayate girim yatkripatamaham vande Shrim Gurudin Taranam. Hare Krishna, dear devotees. So we are reading the section. Just give a brief overview. Here, the different regions in the island of Jambudvipa have been mentioned, and how different incarnations of the Lord are being glorified through wonderful prayers by the inhabitants of those various regions. Yesterday, Sundaran Prabhu described wonderfully how in Kim Purusha Varsha, the inhabitants wonderfully pray to Lord Ramchandra. And in this particular section that we're going to discuss today, there is a description of Bharat Varsha. And Narad Muni is describing and praying to one of the wonderful incarnations that appears in Bharat Varsha in Badrika Ashram, which is Nar and Narayan Rishis. Before we go into the discussion today, I just like to share a couple points. I think Sundaran Prabhu had mentioned last week when he was describing that these wonderful sections that we are going through right now, they're offering such elaborate prayers. And oftentimes when we read, especially for myself, especially when I used to read the Krishna book earlier, I never had a lot of enthusiasm reading that part because I could not appreciate that very much. But we have to understand that there's immense power in prayers. And I'd like to share a few points that I heard from a lecture from my Guru Maharaj about the power of prayers. So prayer or Vandanam is actually one of the limbs of the Navada Bhakti process, the 9 limbs of Bhakti. Archanam, Vandanam, Dasyam. So by itself, it has the potential to elevate our consciousness and bring us closer to Krishna. Usually, when people pray in this material world, they can pray, even prayer is under the influence of the 3 modes of material nature. So sometimes when people pray, the prayers can be in the mode of ignorance. So examples for mode of ignorance is when people pray for destruction of other people. We see one great characters in our history, such as Ravana, who used to pray to get power so that he could destroy his enemies and cause havoc. Similarly, in modern day examples, we see a lot of terrorists who belong to religious organizations, and they also go to places of worship and they pray for abilities to be able to destroy and create havoc in society. So this kind of prayer is in mode of ignorance, and this is not what we are interested in. The second kind of prayer that says in mode of passion, and that kind of prayer is what we normally see most places in religious institutions. When we see people go to the Lord in front of the deity, usually with a long list of demands. I want this, I want that, I want a good house, I want a job. So usually that kind of prayer is prayer in the mode of passion, and we are not interested in that. And that's not what's mentioned here as well. The third kind of prayer is in the mode of goodness. An example that was given was the like Mother Teresa. So she was a very wonderful saint in the Christian parampara, who prayed to the Lord and to be able to get the benediction of being able to help other people who were in need, and she did wonderful service for them. But that also that service itself is also very limited in its scope and its outcome, because ultimately it's not benefiting the soul; it's just benefiting the body. So the prayers in these 3 kind of modes, ignorance, passion, and goodness, is not what we're interested in and not what's mentioned in Srimad Bhagavatam. Beyond the modes of material nature comes the Shuddha Sattva state. And in that state, there are also 2 different kinds of prayers offered. One is offered by impersonalists who pray for liberation or mukti. And we are not interested in that either. What we are interested in the Shuddha Sattva stage of prayer is prayer that enables us to achieve Krishna Prem, and that is love of Godhead. So when we read these wonderful prayers that's being offered to Kurma Avatar, Matsya Avatar, Sri Ramchandra, and in this particular section today to Narayan Rishi, we will realize and we should try to imbibe the emotions, the spirit of the personality who's offering these prayers. And by paying attention to that, we ourselves will benefit in our spiritual lives. By understanding the goal of these prayers is to achieve Krishna Prema. Now, usually when we offer prayers, there are four components that are normally offered by devotees. There's a common theme when we look at the different prayers that are offered. First thing, normally when the prayer is offered, and you will come across this, and when you analyze different prayers in Srimad Bhagavatam, is the first component of prayers is glorification. If we, for example, if we take the analogy of Shikshashtakam. So when Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, appearing as a devotee, is praying to Krishna, he begins with glorifying. Cheto darpanamajanam bhava mahadavagni nirvapanam. So he sings the glories of the holy name and the power of the holy name to deliver us from this material world. So the first aspect in prayers is glorification. The second aspect that we usually see in prayers is about humility and gratitude. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu prays, Rinadapi Sunichena Tarorava Diva Sahishrana. So he expresses humility and gratitude in his prayer to the Supreme Lord. The third thing that's usually offered in prayers, so after glorifying the Supreme Lord and his holy name, after offering humility and gratitude, we ask for benediction. And it is important, it is not that we should not ask for anything. It's important to ask for benediction, but we have to see what kind of benediction is being asked for in the prayer. Prabhu in Shikshashtakam prays na dhanam na janam na sundarim kavita vanjagatisha kama. I don't want these kind of benedictions. What I want is mama janmani janmani ishvare bhavatar bhakti rahetu kitve. This is the benediction I want, that in birth after birth I may always remember you and serve your lotus feet. And the last component of prayer, after glorification, expressing humility and asking for benediction, is asking for forgiveness. So asking for forgiveness is important because it also tells us our real position that's there in this material world. Sometimes devotees feel, and I heard this wonderful example by Amrendra Prabhu, that we are not qualified, we are so fallen, we are so degraded in our consciousness. We're good for nothing. So that does not mean humility, and that should not be the whole and sense of our consciousness in devotional life. At other times there are devotees who feel that we've achieved so much, we're such wonderful deity service pujaris, we're such wonderful kirtanyas, make such wonderful prasad, so we should not have that pride as well. So how do you um, reconcile these two different emotions that we have? So Amrita Prabhu was describing that it should be like an elastic band, like there's a tension. So at the same time, you should realize that when you pull yourself down, that I'm not qualified, but at the same time, you should stretch yourself up with your aspirations. Even though I'm not qualified, O Supreme Lord, I want to be able to serve you well. I want to be able to do the best that I can offer to you. So that tension, that energy should be there in our bhakti, in our spiritual life. Not that no, I'm good for nothing, so it's better I don't do anything. No, that even though I'm not qualified, O Supreme Lord, if you empower me, and I really, really beg you for that empowerment, for that benediction, that I'm able to serve you and the Vaishnavas to the best of my abilities. With that kind of background, now let us look at the prayers that are being offered by Narad Muni to Nar Narayan Rishi. Now, before this also, I'd like to also give a brief background. There's a very interesting story about Nar Narayan Rishi themselves. So this wonderful incarnation of the Lord appeared in the age of Swayambhuva Manu. At that time, Dharmaraj or Yamraj had married the 10 daughters of Daksh Prajapati, one of them being Mother Murti. What also had happened at that time, there was an appearance of a personality, a king called Dambudbhava. This personality, Dambudbhava, is a personification of pride or Damb. And being very proud, being of a demoniac nature, what most demons, they always want immortality. And you see, even modern day people, they try to achieve immortality, thinking that they can, control the laws of nature and supersede the wishes of the Supreme Lord. But this particular Rakshasa or demon, he first approaches Lord Brahma, and he's unsuccessful. Lord Brahma doesn't grant him immortality, and then he approaches Surya Devta. And when he approaches him, he also asks for the same benediction, and Surya Devta says, "No, I cannot offer you immortality." So just like we saw Hiranyakashipu, how he kind of created a formula to somehow indirectly become immortal by asking for different benedictions, and we are well aware of that. This particular Rakshasa, Dambudbhava, he also created his own formula. He asked for a particular benediction that may I be blessed with 1,000 kavachas, and anybody who has to kill me has to do austerity for 1,000 years and then fight with me for another 1,000 years, and then he'll be able to break one kavacha, and after that he will die. So somebody else will have to come and deal with the other kavachas. So in this way, he thought nobody will be able to do it, and he'll become immortal. When Mother Murti, she saw that this demon is creating havoc in the world, she prayed to the Lord to appear as her son, and the Lord incarnates with his energy as a twin, as Nara and Narayan Rishi. And what they do is when they do austerities in Badrika Ashram, and they're challenged by this Dambudbhava demon, or also called Sahasra Kavach demon, a demon with 1,000 kavachas. He attacks them. They take turns. One of them does penances for 1,000 years. The other fights with him and breaks his kavacha. And after breaking the kavacha, according to the boon, the person becomes unconscious, like almost dead. But the other person, Nar or Narayan Rishi, comes and he brings life back to them. And then he starts fighting with them, and the other person starts doing austerities. So in this way, they take turns and they break 999 kavachas of this demon, Dambudbhava. Um, and in doing so, when he's just left with one single kavacha, he runs away from the battlefield and takes shelter of Surya Devta. So Nar Narayan Rishi, when they pursue him, and they dictate, they tell Surya Devta to give up this Rakshasa who's taking his shelter. Surya Devta says, "Oh, I cannot do that. He's my devotee. He's taken shelter of me." He hesitates. So then Narayan Rishi says, because you're not listening to the instruction of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, you will be condemned to take birth in this Bhulok as in a joint appearance of Karna. So Karna was basically a joint appearance of Surya Devta and this Dambuddha Rakshas, Dambudbhava Rakshas. And because we see that Karna had like two personalities. One was a very charitable personality coming from Surya Devta, and one was his demoniac nature coming from this demon. And we see how, born with one kavacha, Indra Devta steals that kavacha, so that when Nar Narayan Rishi take appearance as Krishna and Arjun, Arjun is able to defeat Karna in that particular fashion. This was just a background and glorification of Nar Narayan Rishi. So we see Narad Muni is praying, and in this particular verse, he's describing Nar Narayan Rishi as Paramahansa Param Guruve, that he is the Param Guru, the spiritual master of all Paramahamsas, all those who are attempting self-realization, who are very advanced. They take shelter of this wonderful personality, incarnation of Supreme Personality of Godhead. Um, and he's also the asset of persons who have no material possessions. He's also called Atma Ram Adhipataye. He is the Adhipati, the master of the ones who are self-realized, Atma Ram. And because of this, many wonderful sages used to visit Badrika Ashram and take guidance and shelter from Nar Narayan Rishi. There's also mentioned that at the end of Lord Krishna's pastimes, Uddhava was also recommended to go to Badrika Ashram and take their shelter. In this way, Narad Muni glorifies Nar Narayan Rishi. In text 12, he continues the glorification, and he describes three or four different aspects of the Supreme Personality of Godhead that Srila Prabhupada elaborates in his purport. The first thing Narad Muni describes, that the Nar Narayan Rishi, being incarnation of Supreme Personality of Godhead, he is not attached to his creation. Normally, when we create something, when we work hard on a project, or we develop a software or something, we feel very proud of it, that we've done something, we've achieved something big. But the Supreme Personality of Godhead does not have any attachment to his creation. Prabhupada described that if we build a big skyscraper, we may think, oh, we may remember this, we may tell so many people about it. But the Supreme Personality of Godhead, he builds so many innumerable universes, but he has no hint of pride or attachment to his creation. Although he creates, maintains, and annihilates, he's completely free from false prestige. The second aspect that described is about the form of Supreme Personality of Godhead. That unlike us who have a material body and we are afflicted by something in Sanskrit word called dehika, which is hunger, thirst, and fatigue. These are the frailties of this material body. The Supreme Personality of Godhead, his body is completely spiritual. It is made of Sat Chidan Anand. So he is not affected by these tribulations of hunger, thirst, and fatigue. The third thing that's described in the purport is that the senses of the Supreme Lord are beyond matter. So, because our senses are so afflicted by material things, as soon as we see some sort of material object, we become attracted to it. So, we see there's natural attraction between man and woman, woman and man. Um, but the Supreme Personality of Godhead, his senses are not attached to anything that's material. So even when we offer material objects to the Supreme Personality of Godhead, he doesn't accept the material ingredient per se necessarily, but accepts the consciousness with which it is being offered. Um, in the last part is mentioned that he is also he's although he's a witness um, to all our activities, he is unattached and he does not interfere with them. That's a very difficult quality to exhibit because normally when we see something, we are always inclined to act or say something. But in Bhagavad Gita, the Lord is described as Upadrishta Anumanta, that he is the Upadrishta. He sees everything that's happening, but he stays unattached and uninvolved with those activities. These are the wonderful qualities that are described in this prayer. Next, Narad Muni goes on to describe that the essence of yoga is to fill one's thoughts with Krishna. That at the time of death, all yogis give up the material body with full detachment simply by placing their minds at your lotus feet. And this can only be achieved if we train ourselves in our regular day to day activities to constantly remember Krishna in whatever we do, in whatever activities are. Prabhupada quotes from Bhagavad Gita 6.47 Yogi Nam api sarvesham mat gatentantara atmana shraddhavan bhajate yamam same yukta tamomataha. That the one who always thinks of me, he is the person who's most dear to me. In text 14, Narad Muni goes on to describe that although the materialists are very much attached to the bodily comforts because they are in the consciousness at the bodily platform, they do not realize that I'm not this body, but I'm the soul. Devotees have this realization, and we should give up the attachment to the body. And the way we can give up the attachment is by actually seeing a connection between our material attachments with Krishna. So instead of being attached and thinking this is my family, this is my home, we should realize that we are living in Krishna's temple and we are taking care of Krishna's devotees who are around us. And in this particular way, we will be able to serve our family very well and also not be attached to them. In text 15, goes on to describe that that yogis depend on their own mental strength, but devotees depend on mercy of Krishna. So, in this particular stanza, Narad Muni is praying to the Lord that Lord, we are so afflicted, we are so attached to this body full of stool and urine that except for devotional service, there is no way to give up this attachment. There's a wonderful example that was shared like when we heard this lecture during the Shera time that when Lord Ram, he was trying to kill Ravan, there's a wonderful example that we learn from that. Every time he would destroy one head of Ravan, the head would come back, whoop, whoop. Every time he kills another head, it moves the head, another head comes back, whoop. So what happens is these heads, they represent different anarthas that are there present in our heart. Um, and by our own endeavor, when we try to control these anarthas, this anger, this lust, this envy, we may be able to control it for some time, but eventually they spring back up. It's very difficult to control them. But the only way, Vibhishan then advises Lord Ram to actually kill Ravana, this personification of lust, is to shoot this arrow of the holy name into his heart. So when we want to achieve advancement in spiritual life, in devotional service, we other than like the other yogis, we do not rely on our own mental strength, but we take surrender and shelter of the holy name of the Lord. And with the power of the holy name of our Lord, our anarthas can slowly be washed away. In the next two shlokas is described about the wonderful mountains and wonderful rivers and how these rivers benefit the people of Bharatvarsha. In text 19, it goes on to describe that one of the wonderful qualities of Bharatvarsha is that people who are born in this, although they are bound by the modes of material nature in Sattva, Rajo, and Tamo Guna, they have the benefit of being present in a society where Varnashram Dharma is practiced. So the Varnashram Prabhupada goes on to elaborate on this purport, and if devotees have time, I would recommend them to read this purport. Prabhupada wonderfully describes the benefits of Varnashram Dharma. And the Varnashram Dharma is important, Prabhupada describes, in order to have some structure in society so that each and every individual, despite their tendencies, despite their shortcomings, can be engaged in a devotional life one way or the other. But nowadays, there is no particular system like this. And Prabhupada describes in the purport that this is a classless society. And we see that as a result, there's just Shudras. And we just recently saw in the concluded elections last night, the Shudras come together and they elect another particular Shudra. So the leaders that we have in modern day world, they lack the vision of what's ultimately good for our society in terms of our spiritual life. So what we see different aspects of brahmacharya of the varnashram system, talking about the different ashramas, and how Prabhupada describes that how the Krishna consciousness movement is spreading all over the world and trying to establish and encourage people to follow these aspects of the varnashram system. So talking about the ashramas, we see that this first is the brahmacharya ashram, where people are the beings are encouraged to follow celibacy, and because these are the very important and formative years of life. This is the fundamental years where the whole basis of our life is being formed, and how they encourage to learn different skills and practice in celibacy and not be distracted. But we see nowadays in this period of brahmacharya from 0 to 25 years of age, how the youth is very distracted, how the teenage people are very distracted, and they're not able to focus on anything. In the next aspect of grihastha, from 26 to 50 years of age, in the varnashram system, it is encouraged how, although we are allowed limited sense gratification, but with being staying with our partner, together we can achieve or conquer some of the difficulties that are there in material life, and together we will to serve the Supreme Personality of Godhead or advance in bhakti. But most people, because of lack of an ashram system, become grihamedis, and they use this particular ashram just to further their sense enjoyment propaganda. In the next stage of Vanaprasth is encouraged in the Varnashram system of slowly giving up our material responsibilities, material duties, and start focusing more on spiritual life. And we see ourselves in our wonderful community in the Baltimore Temple, how I see so many wonderful devotees who are in the stage, and they spend so much time doing services in the temple, visiting dhams, and trying to focus more and more on their spiritual life and get detached from family in this particular perspective. And the last is taking sannyas ashram. In text 20, it is also described that one of the advantages of taking birth in such a system and is to take association of devotees. And what is described is the power of this association, which we have discussed several times in the past. It is described that Bhakti Yoga, devotional service to Lord Vasudeva, is the real path of liberation. So the real liberation that devotees seek is not freedom just from this material pangs and material miseries, but is the association of devotees, which will imbibe in us this mood of Bhakti Yoga, so that we can develop this Krishna Prem and be able to serve the Supreme Personality of Godhead and His devotees. So with this, I'll end the discussion today. Please forgive me if I've misspoken. Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai, Ananta Koti Vaishnavinda ki jai. Hare Krishna.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Chaitanya Prabhuji. Hare Krishna.
Thank you, Prabhuji. Hare